And welcome to this week's episode of the Dr. Tech Show, where myself, Pauline, Roche, and Sweyn Hunter, and sometimes guests, as we have today, guide you to the world of online communications in a show which is the brainchild of the late John Popham. And our guest this week is Chris Ashworth from Nominet, and I'm just scrolling down to the right page, the head of social impact at Nominet. So welcome, Chris. How are you? Where are you? And how's the weather there?
Hello, Pauline. Hi, Sven. The weather, I'm fine. About having had COVID twice, but fully recovered.
No,
I know. I'm collecting Greek letters, and I learned a new word to describe the weather. I'm down in Abingdon, which is south of Oxford. Apricity, which means the winter sun. It's beautiful. Okay. So the skies are blue, and it's freezing and lovely.
Great stuff. Sweyn, what about yourself?
Well, I'm in Orkney in the far north of Scotland as usual. Apricity, did you say? I think that if you've got that, I think we've got appreciation as well. It's capricious weather here too, although only at times because there's big black clouds rolling past in the breeze as well.
Okay. Well, here in Birmingham, it is I have a bluish sky, some clouds as well, but definitely sunny and warm when you get out into the sunny side of the street. So we'll be sticking to that, I think, later today. So as we say, we're joined by Chris today to talk to us, and usually we talk about other things before our guests, but today we're going to go straight into our guests because Chris has to leave us at 12:30. So Chris, welcome to the show, and we're delighted to catch up with you again. You came on the show, I think it was September 2020. I was looking just at our previous shows with Ross McCulloch from Third Sector Labs. To talk about Reboot at the time, and that was it's been one of our most popular viewed shows. So it's great to have you back again, and welcome. And how are things with you? And what have you been up to lately?
That's unusual for me to be in the popularity rankings. That's pleasing to hear. I'm really well, thank you. It's been 18 months?
Nearly.
Yeah.
That's flown by, as it has for probably everybody in various different ways working in this space. Reboot in particular has had some success. We were really pleased with the reception it received initially about trying to tackle the digital exclusion crisis and digital access crisis. So, and I think it was really during the BBC Give a Laptop appeal that happened in the winter following the launch, where things really started to take off, and it ended up, I've just been looking at the figures actually because I have to report on them, and it's had 18,000 unique views, which, considering the type of people visiting the platform are community organisers, people developing schemes, schools, organisations, that's a really pleasing number to know that we were helping to support that ecosystem across the UK, all themselves trying to tackle the digital access.
Yeah, can you just describe Reboot, Chris, for people who might not be aware of it?
Yeah, it's fundamentally it's a digital toolkit. So it's an instruction manual. It's tailor-made to the individual who might be viewing it. It's targeting people who are involved in their community and getting devices and data out to an individual. And it works on a premise that not everybody can afford a new laptop or learning device, as we like to call them, and so tries to find a way to say, look, that hit, that expensive part of the equation for digital access exists in one form or another up and down the country in communities already, and we're retiring those devices by and large to waste. In terms of those pieces of kit, they're probably one of the most expensive pieces of equipment in your house, and yet they're the ones that are least likely to be recycled or sent to second hand because of electrical problems, sort of standards. And we said, hang on, people are doing this anyway. Right up and down the country during the pandemic, people were giving laptops to their friends, to their relatives, so that they could connect. Particularly those people who are hibernating because of the pandemic and shielding, but crucially, the problem seemed to be young people accessing education, trying to do their schoolwork on their parents' mobile phone or having to do it in a paper-based manner. and we just couldn't find the stock to supply new kit to the millions of people who were struggling with that. We couldn't afford the kit even if we knew it was there, and yet you have these devices all around the country, up to 40 million devices up and down the country. Let's reuse them, let's redistribute them, let's rehome them and turn them into engines that can reduce, the economic, the education barriers that families were facing. So it's trying to do a few things, really. It was trying to say, let's tackle the immediate challenge of digital access and inclusion. But, and this is always a challenge when you're developing a new program that has sort of two ideals, is there's an environmental aspect to this as well. So at the moment, the normal approach by companies was to send laptops to e-waste, to destroy them, physically destroy them. Some of those component parts get recycled, some don't. Some parts of them end up in landfill, and there's a huge environmental impact in terms of emissions from that. So let's not only try and find a solution to an immediate and pressing issue, something that yourselves and I and other parts of the community working in this space worry about all the time, but let's also bear in mind the huge environmental considerations of this as well. And let's try and put out there a new approach. We don't have to accept business as usual. There's a little bit of innovation that's needed, some behavior change, and that's when we really get excited about getting stuck into something new.
Great. So we had a meeting last week with the Emma Bierman and other colleagues who are working in the space to kind of find out how that had gone. And you said just earlier on that 18,000 visits to the site. Can you tell how many actually downloads there were of the playbook?
I can try. So I'll need to go onto the Google Analytics to have a look. It's in the low thousands in terms of conversion. Okay. There's two ways of accessing the information on Reboot. You can read in line on the platform after you've answered the questions, and then if you're really serious about it, you can go and download a full personalized playbook, which means you can save something to share with your project team, to work through as a workbook and make sure you've addressed every single point. Yeah. So I suppose that the reflection for Reboot now, and why we've spent the last year doing quite a bit of research in the background, is Reboot came about because of the crisis appeal that we undertook as part of Device.now, trying to get new machines physically into the hands of vulnerable people and vulnerable families, or people locked down from school. And it was brilliant to be part of, but like any emergency response or crisis response, it's fairly inefficient. You're doing all the hard work when the solution might not be the most perfect one. Reboot was about designing our way out of that problem and putting the power in the hands of the communities to go, okay, actually the answer lies with everybody. And there's an exchange, and that those computers that we were shipping in from China don't need to travel that far. They can travel 200 yards down the street. But we also developed Reboot in terms of designing our way out of the challenge. We also developed that with a level of urgency as well. We knew that the BBC and other big organisations were wanting to mobilise ahead of the second lockdown. And so the level of user research and the kind of longitudinal research that we had available just didn't exist. So there was an opportunity in the last year to go, just how many of these groups are continuing to exist at a grassroots level? How many are working really hard to carry on? How many are changing the system? How many are struggling with resources? What is the real picture out there 1 year on? And so we've been working with the Restart Project, who are a fantastic charity behind the Right to Repair drive, and who we worked with during the campaign to set up the directory so people could find each other. And we started to ask that question: was Reboot as a digital toolkit really useful for you? If so, how? What else do you need? Are you still operating? What challenges are you still facing? So I suppose part of that is going, let's undertake, now we've got a resource, let's undertake some deep listening and an exercise in listening to the people who are operating and working hard at this day in, day out, and trying to understand all the complexity of the system, so that we can start to imagine Reboot playing a different role in the future. So it's allowed to evolve, it's allowed to grow in different areas, shrink in others. What do people really need? Who's standing up to the challenge? And that sort of pattern you see in all sorts of crises that I've worked on in the past. You see, during the pandemic, the massive emergence of all the mutual aid groups. And some will continue to thrive this year, in 5 years, in 10 years, and some will say, job done. So it's starting to understand the ecosystem post-pandemic as to what remains and what the different ebb and flow of an ecosystem look like, and how can Reboot play a supporting role to that, and in what capacity. So
what were the most surprising things, or the things you were at least expecting that you found out through the research?
I think the continuation of groups in clusters was something. So you see more activity when there's clusters of groups who've got a dependency on each other. So in London in particular, there's a vibrant community of practice, and because they're supporting each other, that's continuing, and it's evolving at a different pace. You've got people who've been working on this prior to the pandemic who have felt that resurgence of interest and activity, who feel more empowered, I think, to keep on doing what they're doing. And then I think what's some hopeful kind of green shoots are the interest from combined authorities and local authorities. So I'm working quite closely in Oxfordshire with the Getting Oxfordshire Online group with the Community Foundation there, and I know there are others. So that level of interest has gone from just grassroots organisations to more collective regional organisations and combined authorities. They have access to resources and budgets and infrastructure that maybe the grassroots groups have been needing and shouting out for. But I see that as really encouraging. School academy trusts and school groups that's also a really encouraging sign that pre-pandemic digital exclusion was simply not on the register of schools. So it's how you sustain that level of interest and that level of involvement across a network. We see a lot more hub and spoke models now. So again, in Oxfordshire, organisations who can concentrate on receiving the devices and doing the technical aspect is really good. And then they've separated in a way from the distribution organisations. So you're starting to see the emergence of a network. And that again will continue to ebb and flow. And then when I hope in the next 12 months, we can start to trigger some of the corporate activity. I see a lot of the network as an output, a throughput. It's receiving the devices now is well understood. Refurbishing that device to a standard where it's useful is understood. And the distribution is understood. That side of the chain is appreciated. I was really excited by the other piece of research that we did with with Lottie, the London Office of Technology and Innovation. And we explored what are the behaviours happening in large corporates. We heard a lot of large corporates stick their hand in the air during the pandemic and say, we've got 1,000 devices, or we've got 8,000 devices. I remember taking two calls on one day in succession with a total of 12,000 laptops.
Wow.
That could be promised over the course of a 12-month period. And what was really, really interesting about that research was it confirmed a bit of a hypothesis of ours, which was companies have never paid attention to this either.
No.
They have a standing, a chief information officer who might have had a contract in place for the last 10 years where a waste management company or a recycling company picks up those laptops for a fee, and then from the instruction of the company destroys those laptops, sometimes dunking them in barrels of water to make sure that the hard drive can't be read. And when we sort of dug into this and said, why is that behavior happening when those machines could, be pro people and pro planet? And there isn't really an answer. It's more, that's what we've already done. That's what we've always done.
Yeah.
And unless the CEO or the board tell us differently, we'll continue to do that. And that's where I get really excited about the positive possibilities of triggering behavior change. Because
to what extent do you pick up? I mean, we've been focusing on on this activity as a solution to digital exclusion. In other words, to digitally include people. But to what extent is the kind of reuse, recycling, environmental argument driving some of this?
Yes, Sweyn, it's a really good question, because it's a discussion we've had 3 or 4 times now, because the primary driver during the pandemic was digital exclusion. And in relation to companies, if you look at the philanthropic behavior of corporates, usually driven by, I'll be really cynical and say PR purposes, but when it comes to sustainability in large organizations, that's usually driven more centrally in the organization by targets and measures. It can be quantified and qualified much more. And so the hypothesis that we're working on at the moment is the sustainability angle for large corporates to engage in device redistribution is potentially the stronger argument than the local community digital inclusion argument. I think what's exciting and what's interesting is both can be tailored to make that case for support. And we'll see which one.
There's a huge amount of data about the environmental consequences of acquiring a new device or rejecting an existing device which still has some life in it. I mean, one person who's done a lot of advocacy for this recently is someone who was a fantastic early pioneer in terms of user experience, on Jerry McGovern, who used to focus mainly on optimizing websites and improving customers' experience on behalf of companies. But he now seems to, when he tweets now, it's almost always about the environmental cost of devices. And I think this is an aspect which it's been bubbling away in the background, but I think it's really coming to the fore now, and it's great to see things like Reboot take that on and try and grab it and use it as a driver.
It's certainly something that I that kind of went over my head before you started talking about it. But I've also picked up that what used to be called CSR in companies is now called ESG, environmental, social, and governance. So there's a language developing around this as well, which is apposite. And it's interesting too that the Tech for Good space is starting to get more organized as well. They're actually looking for a worker at the moment, the network, and I think there's great opportunities to. I've always wanted the Tech for Good world to be interfacing more with the kind of vanilla tech world, if you like, to kind of make these things better for everybody, really, because we know that for access, for example, for a ramp, doesn't just help wheelchair users, it helps people in buggies, people carrying luggage, people in all kinds of temporary incapacity situations. So, we know that improving something for one group usually ends up helping a lot more groups as well. So, yeah.
I think we've had this similar with, I don't know if this is the right term, but a kind of double theory of change when you interlock one initiative around 2 principles. So we have a podcast called This Is How, which is focused on digital skills for young people. And we've worked in this space for a number of years, but it brings together 2 scenarios, which is the youth underemployment crisis, in support of young people and their motivations and confidence to take on a role. But it also addresses the digital economy and the massive talent crisis that's happening there. So it's how do you kill two birds with one stone? And I suppose that the Reboot has got those sorts of parallels, which is how do you address the environmental issue, and how do you address the digital exclusion issue? And I think you're right, Pauline, about the circular economy and its presence in Tech for Good. I know it's many years old now, but the pioneer around this has probably been Fairphone.
Yeah.
And the question about technology and its environmental impact, I suppose, has come up more predominantly in the last 6 to 12 months around Bitcoin and Bitcoin mining and proof of stake, and that Bitcoin generates or generates more CO2 than all of Argentina or whatever it's combined. Don't quote me on those live on. But that raises those issues, and I think they're right issues to raise. And I think the thing with something like Reboot, and I'm sure there are plenty of other similar initiatives in similar spaces, is it makes it practical. It's something people can do. They can be personally conscious of the impact they're having with the laptop, with that expensive piece of kit. It's complemented by things like electric vehicle purchase, where people can feel a concrete, tangible effect and equate their role in action or inaction. So yeah.
Great. So so what's going to happen now around Reboot? Are things going to change? What's your plan?
Yeah, we now need to lean on these two pieces of research. We've got the intelligence now, I suppose, through both pieces of research to do something exciting in the next 12 months. So we need to take the research that you've been part of, Pauline, and understand what's needed and how do we build something really effective that's sustainable, that people can rely on, listen to the recommendations and make adaptations to how Reboot presents itself, what it offers, how it connects people. But then we also need to perhaps reimagine its position. So not just operating at a grassroots level, but also using that collective intelligence to challenge corporate behavior positively and give organizations across the UK the opportunity to be part of the healthier system that we're looking for. We know, for example, in the square mile in London, there are up to 30,000 laptops that are going to waste, going into the system with no throughput. That could have a massive impact with the right infrastructure behind it on digital exclusion, and then the net benefits to the environment by extending the life of a machine is also clear. So the arguments are all in place. We need to evolve Reboot, keep what's good, and start to connect these different forces together.
Great.
So it's exciting.
Yeah, it is. It is. And the people who were at the meeting with us last week, people like Chris Honeysett, who had a very different experience to his in his kind of 12 months experience of kind of refurbishing computers. It's interesting to see that the experience is different up and down the country. It's not a common experience for everybody, and so it could be that things need to happen differently in one part of the country as others.
One of the golden lessons I learned, I worked at Oxfam, as you know, for over a decade, with one of the largest trading networks across the UK in terms of secondhand. The Oxfam shop network has been going for over 50 years. And one of the reasons why it's managed to stay successful in spite of, huge changes on the high street is that it put the power in the hands of the local shop manager rather than a really centralized model. And I've had many debates over the years about, you can do instruction from on high, but unless you put the people in charge who are working in their local area, who understand the needs of their users, who understand, the infrastructure that's in place around them, then it will fail. And so we've got to make sure that however we evolve Reboot in the right way is still led and honours the fact that it's for a community of practice working in local areas up and down the country. If we fail to do that, then it will be a vanilla platform offering not much service.
Yeah. I noticed, I didn't get around actually to reading your biog out to kind of remind people, we just went straight into it because we knew you from before, but I'm reminded that we work with government as well on the Charity Digital Skills Group. How active has that been over the last 12 months?
Not as much, I think, but I think that's been largely because of the crisis. So the charity digital skills in particular, I think, has taken a bit of a back seat. So I know that there's lots of ongoing activities, and we've seen a natural maturing of digital within charities. Digital adaptation has become a necessary as blended support, through lots of our partners and programs. Blended has become a major route where they were previously face-to-face or offline. But I know that people like Zoe Amar and others will be straight back on the case once things calm down a little, if they will.
Change is the only certainty, isn't it?
Exactly.
And I also noticed that you're also now a Digital Poverty Alliance ambassador, and we've mentioned the Digital Poverty Alliance several times on the show, and we've had Paul Russell on. We're going to have Cara Allman on again soon. So it's great to see all the, if you pardon the phrase, the great and the good in this space coming together to kind of share the work.
I think the Digital Poverty Alliance is exactly what the space is needed, the kind of mortar between all the bricks, particularly because so much activity has happened in terms of, we've been really busy with the Digital Youth Index in the last 6 months, about trying to understand the core data and benchmarks so that everybody's working from the same data set and has the foundational insights that they need. And then with an active community like the Digital Poverty Alliance, well-resourced, lots of great people involved, and trying to glue everything together in a really meaningful way is just what's needed now. After so much disparate activity of 2 years.
Well, you don't let the grass grow under your feet either, Chris. You according to your LinkedIn as well, you co-founded Agencies for Good and the Click Zero campaign. So it's like you're using your capacity and your means very well to spread the goodies out and sort of encourage others to get involved as well.
It stops me having to do, there's a lot of tasks that happen in a busy household, like the ironing and the washing and the cooking. And if I can make an excuse that I'm still busy, I get out. I'm really excited. But Agencies for Good has been such a pleasure. It started off with 10 Tech for Good social tech agencies working together in support of some urgent requirements through the pandemic. And I think now we opened it up. We brought in some community management. We let people take it in the direction. I think there's over 300 organisations and freelancers on there now, and I'm quite happy to let that evolve as it needs to. And then Click Zero, that's a pet project passion of mine that I hope is policy change, asking for essential government services where there's no competition. They should be free of charge for everybody to access.
Can you give some examples of the kind of services you mean in that area?
So at the very start of the pandemic, people are probably getting tired of me mentioning this now, but we managed to push the government and the 4 telcos to zero rate the NHS so that it was free to access. So not just to drive down costs, but to drive down misinformation as well. Quite a number of other services followed suit, so educational resources and others, but it was based on a belief that, the internet is open in terms of content, but not open in terms of contact. Not everybody can access the internet when they need for essential services. And so it's a position pushing the government, Ofcom and the 4 telcos to say, Do you know what? The relative costs for us to zero rate and make free essential public services that fall under .gov.uk is entirely possible and plausible. And it means that a slim part of the internet that is essential means people have access to it no matter what. So it's about imagining the welfare state in the 21st century. And we know there are risks. We know there are limits to what you should zero rate. Net neutrality is incredibly important. So we're asking for a very specific part because it's got proof that it works and it supports people. There's no point having an open internet if the people who need it the most can't access it.
Great. Well, that's a great line to finish on, Chris. We know you have to leave us. If people want to contact you, where's the best place to find you online?
Twitter, LinkedIn. I've closed MySpace now, so you can't get me there.
You do look like you're young enough to have had a MySpace.
I wish.
Of the age. Sorry, to have that.
That's a great line. I'll finish on, Pauline.
Thanks for joining us, Chris, and we look forward to keeping in touch with you.
Thank you. Really lovely to see you again.
Yeah, all the best. Bye.
So
great to catch up with that. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Great. So we move on to our awareness slot, which we moved to just like later in the program than usual. And this week we're thinking about something called the Big Energy Saving Campaign, which I will share. I can't do these things at the same time as talking, so let's just get that right. It's a national campaign. I think it's in its 8th or 9th year, and it's intended to help people cut their fuel bills and get all the financial support they're entitled to. And the week focuses on raising public awareness of how to switch energy supply. I'll say more about that in a minute. To get the best deal, how to access discounts and make homes energy efficient. It's a partnership between Citizens Advice, the Energy Saving Trust, and the Department of Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy. And there's lots of other organizations involved as well. And so I think most of us are probably worrying about our energy bills this year, with big increases hitting, some have already hit, and with suppliers going bust right, left and center. And there'll be more of that to come over the next few months. And so unusually, whereas normally a big focus of this campaign this week would be to encourage people to investigate and switch suppliers, the advice at the moment is actually unusually not to switch, to stick to whatever tariff you're on, because it's very unlikely at the moment that there'll be a cheaper one available because of the high costs that energy firms are facing. The absolute backstop price cap for the standard tariffs is likely to be better than any newly available tariff. Obviously, if we happen to be on, if I or you happen to be on a fixed deal already, then obviously that will carry on to a certain date. But the advice at the moment certainly is, when that comes to an end, don't switch, because you'll probably get a worse deal than if you just stay where you are. There will be a price increase at the end of that, but I just think it's great that there's all this online stuff available, mainly through the Citizens Advice Bureau.
Excellent.
About how to deal with all this. So that's this week's awareness slot. I
note that they're saying that the Citizens Advice are saying they're delivering key energy advice to citizens across England and Wales. Is there something else happening in Scotland? Sweyn,
the Citizens Advice is available in Scotland as well. It will be. I wouldn't be surprised if they're using the same materials. But I'm sure that the advice on something like this doesn't depend very much on where you are in the UK. And it can be used by, but yes, the Citizens Advice Scotland is a separate organisation. Not sure about Northern Ireland, but I'm sure some things going on there.
Well, I know I've been affected by the closure, the bulb going bust personally, so I'm going to be looking this up and getting myself aware of this and sharing it with my users at Northfield Community Partnership for the digital literacy project as well, because energy saving is part of the project to help people, have keep warm.
Absolutely. Good. So you have an event, I think.
Oh, I do. Yes. Sorry. so that week is Big Energy Saving Week, 17th to 22nd of January. And the event that I picked up is about Digital Unite, an old friend of ours on the show. And they're doing a webinar for their Digital Unite e-learning and support program on Thursday, the 20th of January, which I'll be attending myself. And they are, Sweyn has it on screen right now. So it's about turning your staff and volunteers into confident digital health champions for free. So this is a program that's being supported by NHSX, and they're encouraging people to organizations to sign up. They'll take up to 10 staff and volunteers to download, to become part of these Digital Health Champions Network. And up to the end of May this year, you can do online learning to skill yourself up as a digital health champion. So it's an online training platform, has over 20 courses and hundreds of resources to help people providing digital skill support. Becoming a digital health champion means you can use the NHS websites and apps. You can order prescriptions and manage your appointments online. You can find reliable health information and connect with local support groups. And if you sign up, you'll get the free training and support. You'll have access to flexible and bite-sized e-learning on a range of digital skills topics, including digital health, supporting older people and accessibility. You'll have ready-made and practical teaching materials and support from the team at NHSX to get your champions up and running. So they're inviting people to register their interest and then attend this webinar on Thursday to pick up more information. So I'll highly recommend this. I'm recommending it to my own staff actually to sign up for it. So yeah, I'm looking forward to catching up with my friends at Digital Unite and hearing more about this opportunity.
That looks like a great event as well. So another event that I've registered for, you've registered for that one, I've registered for this next one, is an event that it's a few weeks away, but the way it's being offered means that it's probably good to register for it now if you're interested, because Alistair Somerville from Acuity, who runs Acuity Design, he's offering a workshop on the 15th of February, which I think is a Tuesday, at 7 p.m. in the evening, called Designing Hybrid Workshops. And what it's all about is taking a workshop that you might use to teach a skill or find out about something with a group, taking that and really focusing on how to deliver that at least partly online, so that you might have everyone on a Zoom call or something like that. You might have some people on a Zoom call and some people in a room. And part of that, I think, is about preparation and the kind of asynchronous offline stuff that you can do before and afterwards. So I'll be quite interested to see how all that goes. It's as I say, on the 15th of November. There's two parts to it. There's some workshop materials which are emailed, and there's a podcast to listen to, and then there's a 2-hour online workshop on the day. And he says he'll be sharing some of his experiences of shifting from in-person to hybrid online workshops and the tools and methods he uses to design workshops. So apparently it's very simple, so I'll hope that it is, and it'll give us a foundation to start with what you know and to adapt it into to whatever type of workshop you might want to deliver or be part of. And so that's that one.
Right. Well, Alistair, I can recommend Alistair as a trainer. I met him several years ago now at a hack, and he just is very methodical and logical about the teaching that he does, and it's all very clear to him. So, and he's good at conveying it to other people as well. So I'll look into signing up for that as well myself.
I think it's run a few times. I think it runs every, by the look of it, roughly every month or so. Okay. I'm sure he'll keep it going as long as there's interest.
That's great. That's great, Sweyn. Thanks very much. So we'll go on to a couple of stories that we picked up in the last few weeks as well. And the first one we've got is about fraudsters posing as family members on WhatsApp. And this is obviously a matter of concern, as one of our usual topics on here is about online safety. And apparently this is happening on WhatsApp. Fraudsters kind of ringing people up or messaging them, and pretending to be family members in order to deceive people. And the bottom line for this is that if you get a request for money in a message, it's always worth giving the contact a quick call on the original number you've saved for them to check the details before you go ahead, even if it's a close relative. And absolutely don't give security codes for any accounts to anyone. This, the article at the very bottom says there's no way someone else's code could be sent to you by accident. And in the case that which were contacted about this, the money was sent using a bank transfer, and the victim isn't sure yet if she'll be reimbursed, but her bank is signed up to the code that pledges to refund customers that fall victim to bank transfer frauds like this. And if you just go back up the to the top of the article, Sweyn, it just on the screen it shows people getting a message saying, "Hi mum, my other phone crashed. This is my temporary number. You can save this one. Message me if you've seen this." So it's kind of using the trust that we have built up with family members to believe that we're hearing from somebody we know and love, and that they're giving us a new number. That it's a kind of in an innocuous message, but then it goes on to as we've heard from in some stories in this article and in others, to eventually ask for money because the person is stuck or needs to pay a bill or whatever. And so what's happening is that people are believing this, and some people are believing it and paying money into accounts, and then not able to get the money back because they've given it up, it seems, of their own free will. So it's concerning, and something we wouldn't want to see happening to our loved ones. So we hope that people will learn from that and kind of be cautious. And we do say often on this program to just be skeptical. Don't believe everything you read online, and in this case, don't believe everything you read on your phone that you think it's a family member, but do be careful and give them a ring to check it is them really messaging you. Anything else you want to say on that one?
No,
Sweyn?
I think that's a very good message.
Yeah.
Check. I think whenever we get any text-based message, it's worth just being extra cautious about whether it really is what it says it is. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Great. So our next story is headlined "Accessibility Awareness is on the Rise, but is it turning into action?" And this is a story from TechCrunch in December, and it talks about, in recent years, has it felt like everywhere you looked, there's something about accessibility or people with disabilities. Many TV ads from big tech firms have featured people with disabilities and accessible technology. And they describe how Apple started with the first primetime ads on network television, followed by Microsoft with an ad during America's biggest game, baseball game, I presume. In a Google ad, a man who is deaf calls his son for the first time using the live caption on his Pixel phone. And Amazon has an ad about Brendan, an employee who is deaf. So clearly accessibility awareness looks like it's growing. And in May last year, in honor of Global Accessibility Awareness Day, Apple, Google and Microsoft announced a slew of updates and resources related to accessibility across their products. Dagra System announced an upcoming accessible games database, and that's now live. So gamers can search for accessible games by platform and filter them by various categories. So it's great that tech companies are talking about accessibility and promoting it and marketing it, but are they taking action? So talking about it doesn't make a website accessible. So a recent Forrester survey found 8 in 10 companies, and this is in the US, are working on digital accessibility. So is anything changing? So that was a question in the 2021 State of Accessibility reports. That report set out to answer to assess the current state of accessibility across companies and industries, a tool to find out what has improved accessibility and what needs to work. So the report has traditionally obtained accessibility metrics by analyzing the state of accessibility on the top Alexa top 100 websites, focusing on the most popular digital projects rather than going for volume. So the Pareto principle, which is the 80-20 rule, applies here. You will reach about 80% of the traffic with the top 20% of digital products. What's interesting is that the Alexa Top 100 listed 31 new websites in 2021 that weren't in the list for 2019 or 2020. Only 60% of the tested websites on the Alexa 100 list in 2019 appeared on the 2021 list. So it's what they're saying is it's easy to see how the pandemic changed online behavior, and the top websites contain many productivity apps such as file transfer and collaboration tools, delivery services, and communication tools like Zoom and Slack. So captions was another thing that changed during the pandemic. As of April 2020, none of the video platforms had automatic captions built in except for Skype, and they weren't of the highest quality. But by May 2020, Google Meet added captions, and at that time, Zoom was beta testing them. But they initially rolled it out only to paid accounts, and then in response to a petition, they made it available on free accounts, but it took about 8 months before that to happen. And then in June, Microsoft Teams iOS app allowed people who weren't on the Teams network to use it with captions for free, which was a great start. But the video platforms, the article goes on to say, need to be navigable without a mouse. So in addition to captions, the platforms need to offer transcripts. And this is what's compatible with screen readers and refreshable Braille devices. So the key results from the Alexa Top 100 website testing were, of the top websites tested, 62% were accessible to screen readers, up from 40% in 2020. Every single page passed for having the valid document lang attribute. Only 11% of websites tested had errors in input field labels, which is great. And the second most common error, it says at the bottom, was color contrast. So there was much improvement of the testing over 2019 and 2020 testing. So that's good that, the things they were trying to make happen actually did happen. And we hope that this testing, as say, refers to the US, we're hoping that this kind of accessibility improvements will be spreading to the UK as well.
Sure.
So
yeah, that's really important stuff. And as you say, I think the situation in the UK is probably a bit different, but it's all good learning.
Absolutely. So the next article, the title is from it's ohchr.org. They sorry, I don't know what that organization is, but the headline is "The web was created for everyone, regardless of their gender." And this is a report that the UN Human Rights and the Web Foundation, which is the organization created by Tim Berners-Lee, who we've met at the World Wide Web, have joined forces to fight gender inequality in the digital sphere. They did a survey which revealed that 50% of women respondents in rural areas and 45% of women in urban areas said they didn't know how to use the internet, in contrast with other findings that show that globally men are 21% more likely than women to be online, and once online, men are 29% more likely than women to create content. Nena Nwakamna, the chief web advocate at the Web Foundation, said the web was created for two reasons: to be a force for good and to be accessed by everyone regardless of their gender, which reflects the headline of the article. She stressed that only half of the world's population was connected and that women need connectivity to educate themselves, to claim and ensure their rights and for their everyday lives. So the Web Foundation's research has also shown women have greater concerns over the privacy than men, especially about having personal data misused, including in relation to online harassment and abuse. Women are also more skeptical about tech companies using their data responsibly. 54% of women respondents said they would not allow companies to use any of their data, compared with 47% of men. So the pandemic has obviously brought to the fore a number of disparities linked to gender and connectivity. Nwakamna says that an increase in gender-based violence in the home because of close proximity during periods of lockdown has also translated into more verbal, sexual, and intellectual abuse online. So as a result, she says, women self-censor, they speak less or just delete their accounts and disappear from the internet. And we've heard stories about that before. So to start addressing the lack of tech skills to keep a substantive portion of women offline and to encourage them to produce more online content, the Web Foundation launched the She is the Code program in West Africa. This was launched in 2016 and teaches women and girls programming and digital management. And so far, 950 participants have graduated from the program. And some of the graduates from the program created a campaign to counter misinformation during the pandemic and hate speech, with content appearing online in social media and on the radio in local languages. And for Human Rights Day last year, some of the program participants joined in UN Human Rights campaign to promote equality offline and online. So that sounds like a really good initiative. And the headline, you shouldn't need to be saying the web is created for everyone regardless of their gender, but obviously we still do So it's good to see people working on that, and especially when people benefit from a program and then they go on to, make good things happen in the world as well. That's good to hear too.
It's good to hear indeed. Yeah. So
moving on, our next story is about Finnish prisons, and we have talked about the criminal justice system on here before. So we're keen to hear about what happens for people who are incarcerated. And the headline is Incarcerated People's Challenges for Digital Inclusion in Finnish Prisons. And it's from tndfonline.com, saying that the digitization of society creates both challenges and opportunities for prisons. Previous studies show that prisons' digitization affects interaction between incarcerated people, prison culture, and reduces recidivism. However, it also poses security risks. So in this study, they asked, how do barriers to digital inclusion appear among incarcerated people in the prison campaign, and how do they perceive whether face-to-face interactions with employees can be replaced by digital services? So the starting point analytically of the study are rhetorical analysis and Goffman's micro-sociological analysis, which I don't know much about, but the research material consists of 26 incarcerated people's interviews from different parts of Finland. And the results shows that gaps in digital skills and access to the internet are key barriers to digital inclusion in prisons. And the question of whether digital service can replace face-to-face encounters raised conflicting comments. Interviewees emphasized the importance of social interaction in their desistance, but also the benefits of digitization, such as the possibility of anonymity. In addition, the research highlights the tense nature of prison culture, as well as the different aspirations of prisoners. The pursuit of digital agency can also manifest itself in various secondary adjustments, and the digitization of prisons means a change in the prison employee's role and work approach. So they looked at both people in prison for something they've done that they were imprisoned for, and for employees working in prisons as well. So I think they're trying to find benefits for both people, or prisoners, and for prison staff. And I think, like other services, there can be good and bad on both sides. But we hope that it's mostly used for good, and that it helps people, survive in prison and to make work a bit easier as well. Yeah. Okay. We might try and get somebody on the show actually about the criminal justice system and
yes,
kind of how that's been affected over the last 12 to 18
it's not something
months.
I thought about. I mean, traditionally, part of being in prison was being cut off from the internet and so on, but that must have moved on a bit. From
I suppose if you're trying to rehabilitate people as well, you need to let them have access to
absolutely
how the world is. So digital being part of the world. So yeah. Okay, moving on. The next story is, the title is 2021 Digital Inclusion Benchmark, and this is from the World Benchmarking Alliance. And this is the second iteration of the benchmark, measuring and ranking 150 of the world's most influential technology companies and their responsibility to advance a more inclusive digital society. And more specifically, it measures what companies are doing to enhance universal access to digital technologies, improve all levels of digital skills, foster trustworthy use by mitigating risks and harms, and innovate openly, inclusively, and ethically. And there are 5 key findings from the iteration, this measurement, and they are that most companies are lagging behind on digital inclusion. Progress is too slow. The leading company is Spain's Telefónica, with a score of 90 out of 100 for their efforts in increasing access to digital technologies, teaching digital skills, making the internet a safer and more trustworthy place, and innovating diversely and ethically. And around 24 more companies showed good performance, but the vast majority are failing with scores of less than 50 out of 100 for digital inclusion, which is a bit sad. The next key finding was about AI benefits, and they're enthusiastic. Companies are enthusiastic about AI benefits, but failing to consider the risks. So while many digital companies spent pages citing the benefits and potentials of artificial intelligence, few seemed concerned about the risks. Just 19 out of 150 commit to publicly available principles for ethical AI. And this number is chilling given the growing evidence of the human rights implications of AI in areas such as facial recognition and algorithmic placement of incendiary information. Without ethical AI principles, digital companies are driving a future where people will have less agency, face potential job loss, and experience inadvertent bias. So we need to be conscious of that and be on the lookout for that. The next key finding was around the questionable impact of technology for good initiatives. And this obviously strikes the heart of my work. It says companies are proud of their initiatives, which include providing free connectivity for schools or discounted services to underserved communities. Unfortunately, many of these initiatives are one-off projects, especially those introduced during the pandemic, it says. And furthermore, only 13 out of the 150 companies assessed published an impact assessment for one of their initiatives. And this number suggests companies aren't serious about their technology for good efforts. And impact assessment, because impact assessments can mitigate the risk of impact washing and provide a roadmap for companies to support digital inclusion. So I think those of us in the technology for good space will have to be encouraging companies to examine their reasons for having technology for good initiatives and supporting them to make them work harder and produce the impact assessments. They may have produced them, but not published them for some reason. So maybe we need to just encourage them to publish them. An old trope here, but one we've said again and again as well. We need more women in tech. It's just one of those things we have to keep saying until doesn't need to be said anymore. The article says the lack of women engaged in research and development is a global problem as it affects the incorporation of gender perspectives in digital products. Consequently, the number of women engaged in technical roles is an important indicator to track. More companies are realizing this. 18% more companies disclose this information compared to last year's iteration, with most of this increase coming from companies headquartered in the Republic of Korea and Japan. However, this still amounts to only 1/3 of companies. On average, women make up just 23% of the technical workforce in the 150 digital companies assessed, highlighting the need for more women in tech roles. And that's probably a higher percentage given because they're looking at digital companies. We know ourselves that the women in tech is still probably under 20% internationally, globally, sorry. And the last finding was that the industry needs to pay attention to its human rights risks and impacts, from online hate speech to the exploitation of children in mining minerals for smartphones. Tech companies can have a devastating impact on human rights. It's therefore crucial that tech companies demonstrate their due diligence on their human rights risks and impacts. Unfortunately, only 15 out of 150 companies disclose that they have the basic processes in place to identify, assess, and integrate human rights risks and impacts in their business practices. IT and software companies lag behind all others in the sector, whilst hardware companies are slightly ahead of the curve. So a bit disappointing news in that, Sweyn, in those five key findings. I mean, I suppose it's not a surprise to us, but it's a little bit disappointing. So please do better, we're saying. Okay.
Let's do better. And
let's just do one more story, I think, before we close today.
Sure.
We're back to our old friend Digital Unite, and they now have a digital inclusion impact diagnostic. So this is something we can all run for our own organizations.
And it follows on from the last story.
It does indeed.
Yeah.
It enables you and your company to assess the impact your organization could have on the digital inclusion agenda. And we'll also show you the benefits that can accrue to your organization from getting involved in digital inclusion, such as improved employee engagement, customer loyalty and brand awareness, not to mention CSR and DSR. That's digital social responsibility credentials, or ESG, as we refer to in the earlier part of the show with Chris Ashworth. So how it works is you'll be asked to answer a series of questions. At the end, you get a customized report based on your answers, and it will detail your organization's digital inclusion impact potential, and also contains suggestions on how you can develop strategies, processes, and activities to promote digital equality in the community. It'll take about 10 minutes and no preparation is needed. And what they say is they'll ask you a series of simple questions about your current approach towards digital inclusion, social responsibility, and employee volunteering. And then they'll ask what your biggest challenges or issues are in this area. And then finally, they'll find out which opportunities to have a digital impact to employee volunteers are most compelling for you. And then whether you choose to continue your exploration of the digital inclusion and digital skills agenda with Digital Unite is entirely up to you. But the report will be yours to keep regardless. So I'll be encouraging all the organizations I'm in touch with to run that diagnostic, because it's always handy to run these kind of things. They've done the work for you by compiling the questions. You just have to run the report and then decide whether you want to do anything with it. But I hope you do. I hope you do something with it.
That's great. Something that we can all do. Good one to finish on.
Yeah, absolutely. Great. So thanks, Sweyn, for another great program. Thanks to our guest, Chris Ashworth. All the links will be in the YouTube blog bit underneath the blurb after the show. Thanks for joining us, and we hope you have a great week. Have a great week, everybody.